between which countries? The shortest war. Well, that's why we have history and we read history books, Mahauda. The shortest war in history was between Zanzibar and England in 1896. Yes, correct, we are not alive, all right? It only lasted 38 minutes. 38 minutes. So, the relevance of this insightful information, it's my appeal to the speakers today. Can we make today our delivery of our speeches efficient, impactful? So let's stick to time. I'd really appreciate that. Fantastic. All right, with that, I'd like to introduce our first session for today. We will be exploring data quality management, and our focus is on a recent case study from a large European company, and as well as the analytical tools used for data quality compliance, monitoring, and reporting, specifically focusing on SACRA as a case study. We will all agree that in today's digital landscape, cybersecurity stands out as one of the foremost global concerns, and I think this was extensively discussed yesterday by the various speakers and panelists. Companies that lack strong cybersecurity governance are seen as less resilient and sustainable. Regulators are also intensifying focus on governance frameworks for privacy, cybersecurity, and data management governance. These three pillars form the foundation of an organization's digital asset protection strategy, guiding policies and processes across enterprises of all sizes. A comprehensive approach to cybersecurity, privacy, and data governance should ensure global regulation, compliance, mitigation of risks, optimization of data value, and enabling quick incident response, prevent disputes, and enhance recovery capabilities. But I think what I also heard one of the speakers yesterday is that we also need to make sure that we are trusted by our stakeholders. Because when we end up with cases where data is leaked, or is compromised, the public at large start losing trust in us. With that, I would like to extend an invitation to our first speaker, Mr. Tom Loxton, who will be sharing a recent case study from a large European bank, as I said. Tom has been working in data and analytics for various large financial institutions in the EMEA region for the last 20 years, specializing in the implementation of data management and analytics strategies, including governance and architecture standards to enable data-driven decision-making. Tom is currently the head of data for UK scale-up logistics tech company AnyVan, after recently returning from Amsterdam, working at the Dutch bank ABN AMRO as an enterprise data strategy advisor. With that, I welcome you to the stage, Tom. Thank you.
Morning, morning, everyone. The clicker. Forward, back. Nice. Okay. Fantastic. That was quite a wordy introduction. Sorry about that. So I don't need to introduce myself. When I was asked by a colleague of mine, Ilana, whether I had anything interesting to say on data governance and data quality management, I thought, geez, that's just great timing, because it so happened I did. Not often one would say that, but I just recently returned the last couple of years working in Amsterdam for a large Dutch bank. And of course, as a data strategy advisor, one of the key things that we had to get right there was data quality management as part of the broader data management framework. But data quality management and the whole data governance framework was really key, of course, as a bank. So I thought, what a fantastic opportunity, just as I've arrived back in South Africa, to kind of give a use case. Of course, what I'm going to try and do is give you 5 years of blood, sweat, tears, failures, and then getting it right, all compacted into 18 minutes. Right. So I'll try my best. Is there a screen down here? Oh, there it is. It's off. Doesn't matter. Okay, let me set the scene then. So why did we need to get data quality management right at this bank? we had, there were many reasons, right? Because, you know, as I'm sure you've kind of gathered through many of these topics that you've had at the moment, you know, data quality is really important because we need to trust our data. And if you lose that trustworthiness of the data, it's a cascading effect of what am I seeing? So from that perspective, we had mounting pressure from the regulatory bodies. So the European Central Bank, the Dutch National Bank, very big, very robust bodies that can come heavily with fines, especially if you think of the credit and risk space. If you're telling them information about the strength of your portfolio, and it's a large enough bank that if something goes wrong, it shakes the foundation of the whole of the European market. So that's a very big trust they put in you, that the models you're giving them, the information you're giving them is accurate. So increasingly, the European Central Bank was saying, we need to know that your data quality is excellent. So when you tell me this is our exposure, that's right, and so on and so forth. So, you know, so this bank was called ABN AMRO. It's got a $14 billion market cap, over 15 countries, 40 subsidiaries, 3,000 data sources, so on and so forth. So the problem was complex. How do you solve data quality when you've got a wide diaspora of regions, regulations, very much different source systems and departments that maybe were parts of other banks that would come together in a merger or an acquisition? So you've got quite a fragmented world. How do you kind of get that right? So I think the two key things I'd like to get across to you in the short space of time I have is really the mindset that we approached it. So we were a central data management office that looked after data management for the whole bank. And we came up with the strategy of how do we roll out things like data quality management across the whole organization. The first part was thinking of it in the terms of prevent, detect, correct. So that's the key thing that we said. So first of all, in data quality management, obviously prevent the data quality before it even starts. So really that was a part of the program that we implemented where we didn't, that's not really something you can fix through technology. You've got to, or a process itself, you've got to really do it before it happens. That involves a lot of source system change management, making sure you have very strong architecture control and IT development processes so that, you know, when you build something, you think of data quality right from the outset. When I build this, is it, for instance, a drop-down where I can only select certain things and not a text field? When I generate the data, do I think about checking that the data I'm generating is correct, or if I receive something from third party? So that was really the basis of trying to prevent it. But of course, that's never always going to go right. No matter how much you try to prevent it, data quality issues will start persisting. Right. So I'll kind of give you a breakdown of what we did across the three pillars, our D-pot as we call it. So we have processes, the organization, the technology, and together these are kind of the three areas that you put together to kind of take care of data quality management. Right. So I'll start on the technology side of things, maybe because it's the most interesting part to some people, but you have to have the three parts of it together, otherwise it doesn't really work very well. So once you've said we can try kind of prevent data, but then if we do have data quality issues, we've got to put something in place to detect that I actually have, where are my data quality issues? So what we did as a bank, and I'll get into this a little bit, you'll see in the next slide, but I'll come back to it, is we built something called the data marketplace, where we took all the golden data sets, we call the source of truth for something that is of a data topic, the revenue, the defaults, etc. There's a single golden source, and we brought all that data together in the data marketplace. And data owners would register their data set there, and everyone from the bank could go online, like a marketplace, and see the data. They could see what it was about. I've got this information. These are the fields I have in this data and what it means and how I can use it. So it's really just making it visible and accessible to everyone to know what data we have across the bank. And really, when we say the golden data, so this is the kind of the right data. If you want to get defaults, this is exactly the field you need, and this is where you get it. So building that data marketplace was the fundamental part of our platform. And then around it, on the data quality monitoring, we did it in a number of ways. First, we said, right, we want a process where people can first define what are my data quality requirements. So we built a manager where we separate our world into data owners and data users. A data owner is you're the owner of that source data. That means you're responsible for its quality. You're responsible for making it accessible to other people to use. On the data user side, you are going to use that data for something like credit reporting or analysis or forecasting. And your role is to say, I need this data and I need a certain kind of quality of the data. So data users could define their data quality requirements online, and that would help data owners build, in the next thing, what we call the DQ check builder. So I could now build a data quality checks. And I could say, right, check the data for things like nullability. Is it unique? Is it coming to me fresh and on time? And you could just build those in a requirements builder. Then, now that we have for those golden data sets sitting in our data marketplace, we have these data quality checks built. We could then run what we call data quality scores. So it would run all these checks against the data and give us a score. And that's really useful because if I'm going to use the data as a data user, I want to know how good is my data? What's the quality like? So we came up with a simple score that helps people understand how much I can trust this data or not. Of course, we've got to do something about those scores. So after that, what you do is you've got these data quality checks, and we have, every time it's running those checks, it creates these signals. And we called that the DQ signal manager. And we sent those data quality signals to the various people who actually own the data. They are responsible for that data being fixed and improved. And those signals are just alerts to say, well, there seems to be a rising trend in the quality of this data. That gives a signal to the people who are meant to be fixing this data that they should do something. They should do something to correct that. We've also said that once it reaches a certain threshold, we can auto-create what we call a data quality issue. Now we've flagged an issue. The central data management unit knows about it. The regulators will also know about it. And that data quality issue is now an issue that the department who's responsible for that data must go away and fix it at source. They've got to go and fix it at source. So that was the series of technologies that we built. Now, I just want to go into the DQ scores a little bit and show you how interesting that was. So this is the data marketplace that we built. A lot of sweat and tears and years of software developers building this. And we gather all the golden data sets, as we call it, put it into that central market, and you could serve up that data to people. But not only that, in the front end, I could see, right, this is the data set, this is what it means, and this is the data quality score. So it's got a 90% uniqueness, etc. That I can get a kind of a level of trust in the data I'm about to use for whatever use case I'm about to use it for. So that's really was useful. We could also tell people how many data issues have been declared against this data set and data gaps, for instance. So if we would have our golden data, we'd bring it into integrated data sets, and we could kind of say, well, there's some data missing here, data gaps, it's missing data. We declare a data gap as well. So that was really useful. So visibility, observability of the quality of your data is super important if people are going to use it and trust it. Right. So what are some of the processes that we implemented? So this was really in the, I'll focus in on correcting data. So we now know we've got a problem with data. We've raised a data quality issue, right? So what we did was in the central department, we had a team that really just focused on orchestrating end-to-end solving these data quality issues. So we put up a really easy to use web page where anyone in the bank could log a data quality issue. They'd be using the data, they can see there's a problem, they log the issue. That would then all come to the central department, and they could see that problem. And then we had a one bank process where that central department looked after nursing those key data issues to resolution. They would be looking after the orchestration of it, but the key point was that all data quality issues must be solved at source, not somewhere along the chain. It must always be solved at source, and all our data had an owner. Someone is responsible for that data. So when I have an issue, we automatically know whose door we're going to go knock on and say, ma'am, this data has got these issues. This is your data quality issue. You have X days to solve it, and we report to the regulator in 90 days, so good luck. Pressure. It's good pressure because we get stuff fixed. How did we, what we quickly noticed was the number of data quality issues grew enormously. We couldn't solve them all, and quite frankly, you're never going to solve them all. So how did we prioritize? And I think that's the key thing we learned. We failed a few times here trying to do everything that came in, first out, whatever. But it was ranking them by the priority of the bank. Now it was in the regulatory theme. So we're like, this is the number one regulatory theme, because for a bank, there are many things that we have to consider to operate, but one thing that we've got to is paramount to us is our license to operate. You lose your license to operate, you close the doors. So those regulatory themes, we'd rank them against those and say, this is what we've got to solve, because when the European Central Bank knocks on our door in another 3 months, they want to see these are closed and keep our license. Right, so that was a process, and it was very helpful. Right, finally, so we've got the technology, we've got the process in place, but we realized that organizationally we weren't really set up to fix data quality issues like we should be, but we weren't really set up for data governance itself in a way that made sense. We're a very large, very complex organization. So we did a very large shift to something that's based on what is called data mesh principles, but effectively it's a federated data governance model. So initially we had a central team that looked after data governance and all of the kind of the data management things about it, and that wasn't working because we had small units inside the business units that kind of helped, but really they felt disempowered. We weren't getting to the root of the problem to solve data quality issues as well as just implement data governance. So we moved to this federated model. And I'll just tell you some key principles and how we did that. So in a federated model, really the main thing is that now we set up data domains. And that's based on the data itself. So we designed these data domains where you'd have like account and savings, investments, finance and risk, and these data domains we're going to empower. We'll give them the responsibility for the quality of the data, but the ownership of those data sets in, let's say, finance and risk. So we now decentralized that ownership and started to empower those data domains. So we gave the central team now held on to the responsibility. We will give you the platforms, we'll give you the tools, and we'll give you the standards of how to do things. But then you, as the data domains within close now to the organization, you understand the data the best. You know how it works, so you are the best people to solve the data issues and to really make it accessible and use. So the data domains had to create the data products, which means accessible data sets for everyone to use, curated, as well as making sure that it's got good quality. And the central team is just empowering them to do that. That shift from a centralized support or just from the platform and standards, but the rest of the responsibilities out of those domains, means you can now start to operate at much faster scale and speed. Because these teams are empowered to do things, they've got the tools and the training, and off they go. So the level of data quality issues we were fixing went from, let's say, 10% of our issues a year to 50% of our issues in the first year alone. And that's kind of how quickly it started scaling up on actually tackling the problem. So it was a key ingredient in terms of the federated data governance model for us achieving lowering our data quality issues. And that's it from me. I don't know how I went in terms of time, but I'd like to call up on stage Carol. No.
I'm just thinking you moved pretty fast, so maybe we can just use this time for questions at the end, and while you stood up there.
Yeah.
Any questions for Charles?
Yes, it's working. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning.
Yeah, we met through email. I'm just interested in the regulatory framework in the market, where you gave the example, especially in relation to the sharing of data, the rules around that. So just give a bit of a sense of the framework there.
Right. So the framework is that the European Central Bank, let's take it from a credit perspective, we would supply them with data on an ongoing basis about some key things about the credit health of the bank, exposure, defaults, default rates, etc. The ECB would then do a review every so often, a deep review, and the review would be along a few pillars. On the model and the reporting, they'd do a deep dive into the model and the reporting. Did it make sense? Do you have data quality on the reporting side, but also when they look at the data, the lineage of the data and the trustworthiness of the data? Because what would happen is, if you say we have this exposure and these default rates, etc., they'd apply a factor of a discount factor to say we don't trust it to this point, so therefore we're going to impose these kind of restrictions in terms of capital restrictions. So that's how they do it. And in terms of access to data, they have a lot of access to our data. We are obliged to give them anything that they basically request, as long as it doesn't cross the GDPR rules. Another thing that they really would drub us on is they'd ask for data. And I've said our key thing about our data strategy is we want trustworthy data, fit for purpose, but also we want to make it rapidly accessible, because when the regulator would ask us for data, we take a couple of months to get it to them, and they didn't like that. And so another finding that we found ourselves in, where they said, why do you take so long? Why 3 months or even 6 months to get us data? What's going on there? Surely, if you're running a bank, the data is this quick. So we had to really work on that as well. There is one bureau there, the KNB, and there is some sharing of the bureaus, but the bureaus are less prominent. They were less prominent there than they are here. We do use them to some degree, but it's a less of a prominent feature. But we do share with the KNB, and that's kind of been there for years. That I don't know. It probably should be. Everything in Europe is regulated, but I'm not sure to what degree it's regulated. Yeah.
Any more questions for Tom?
My name is Samu Mukoko. Thank you, Tom, for a very insightful presentation. I was just curious about how your data score looks like. What kind of parameters did you use to develop that score?
That's a good question. Thank you. So, the owners of the data set, they could define what are the checks that they wanted to put together. The types of checks that we can have is the uniqueness of the data, the completeness of the data, the freshness of the data, so how often is it refreshed. So based on those number of checks that they built, we'd rank each of those checks. Then we'd create a combined score, the DQ score, and effectively we'd weight it against those checks that we decided on to give it a rounded weighted score. So try and make it simple and readable. So we'd have an overall score of, let's say, 70%. And that was simply just a weighting. Let's say I've got 4 checks, and they all kind of, in a certain score, and then we give a combined 70%. So my uniqueness is 95%, but my freshness is 60%, and you give a weighted score. But we were always constantly working on what's the right kind of score to give an accurate reflection of the data, because of course it can be excellent data in every metric, but it's not fresh. We only get it once a week, and this is daily data, for instance, or once a month. So that was something that we're constantly working on. Sometimes we just split it up. We'd say, across the 4 checks, this is the percentage of what it's passing, just to kind of make it more granular. Yes, exactly. So you'd create the score, and then we'd create a threshold. Once the score went below the threshold, we could do a certain number of things. So the one action we could do is the system would automatically create a data issue, and so on that data field or data set, you've got a data quality issue, and now you must go away and fix it to the owners of that data set.
Good morning, and thank you for the presentation. I think just coming back to Mahota and the other gentleman's questions, in South Africa we've got a data sharing environment where all the credit providers share, and the decisions and the scores are based on the combined data set. Am I correct in saying that the data marketplace that you built was an internal data marketplace, and external data sets and external performance and other banks' information is not utilized when those scores and decisions are made?
So let's put it this way. The data marketplace was primarily for internal data, but we did start accepting external data, like actually some of the K and B data sets. So we did start bringing in, by the time I left, we brought in maybe 30 to 50 external data sets, because of course you'll get currencies, we'll get more external mortgage rate forecasts. So we did bring in that other data, and we would actually put on data quality checks for those individual data sets. Of course, the complication will lie when you have the individual golden data sets, and now you start combining data sets. So those we called integrated data sets, which you could get in the data marketplace as well. So we'd have the core golden data set, but as soon as I merged it and combined it with other data sets, for instance, those were what we called integrated data sets. They too would get a score, which would be based on, and it would start getting a little more complex, but it would be based on the scores of the golden data sets. So the golden data sets brings in the score, and it'll affect the score of that integrated data set.
Could you see any difference in the risk matrix or scoring when you started bringing in the external data sets against just utilizing your own internal data marketplace?
Is the question, was the data quality score lower or higher?
Well, I think the risk score from not really a data quality point, and I think bringing in, if you look at what we're doing with municipalities, they've got a million different types of formats that are utilized to get the data in, so data quality and data format, but the risk profile around your customer, did that change when you start bringing in external data and external insights, or wasn't it utilized for that?
It's such a large corporation that you can bet that they were using it to some degree in the risk area. There's so many use cases. I could say that it depends on the data that you're bringing in. But the bank was a firm believer of using external data to get a wider risk profile of the customer. So it goes to follow that a bank knows so much about its customer, but the more you know about the customer's behavior outside of just what it knows, its interactions, that gives you a much fuller risk profile. So absolutely.
Fantastic. Any more questions? There's another question, Mahal.
Yeah, I just wanted to understand. For example, this was in an internal project, isn't it? For
the bank.
Yeah, for the
Yeah,
bank, yes.
yeah.
How is it aligned to the GDPR data?
Yes.
Yes, how is that alignment? How did you?
Well, of course, GDPR is an important guiding set of principles that we have to follow when we build these things. So, with GDPR, I think the key thing is this level of sensitive information that you're dealing with. So, what we had to do when building this is we had to make sure that we had a way to flag sensitive data by the GDPR rules. So easy enough is when somebody wants to onboard their data onto the data marketplace or register their data, we had to have functionality where they could flag what type of data it is and its sensitivity. Of course, then we had to build something of when people want to access the data, we had to take that into account. So now we had what we call data access requests. You'd fill in the data access request to get the data, and you'd say what of the data you wanted, and we'd know this level of sensitivity of the data, and that would have to go through a series of approvals. Some data, so of the data that's kind of the secret level data versus kind of non-public information versus public information, would affect the level of approvals to access that information. With some data where you just do, like medical information about the customer, you just really, it was very hard unless it's a very, very good use case to use the data, you wouldn't be able to access it. So building the way that people access data and we store the data and what you can see was very important.
Thank you so much, Tom. Mahouda?